everyone. Hi, Roy.
Hi.
So, welcome everyone to this Engage to Excel group webinar. Today's subject is planning for better recognition in 2021. My name is Tamika Figaro, and I will be the moderator for today's webinar. So, to answer all your questions, we invited our Chief Learning Officer, Roy Sanderson. The goal for our webinars is usually to have insightful conversation and answer all your questions you have around the topic. So during today's webinar, we invite you to join the conversation and ask questions using the Q&A chat box. And if there are subjects you would like us to address in the future, please send us an email at the e2egroupmarketing@e2egroupmarketing.com. I will put this email address in the chat box so you can have it with you. Just give me a second. Here you go. So before we get started, as usual, I will go over a few housekeeping items. First of all, this webinar is being recorded. It will be available on the Redo and Engage to Excel Vimeo channels. We will make sure to send you the link via email when it's ready to watch. So you will not have to look for it because we will send it to you. Lastly, all attendees' microphones are muted. So as I said before, please use the chat box or the Q&A function to communicate with us. That's it. So for today's webinar, I'm joined by Roy Sanderson. He is the Chief Learning Officer of the Engage to Excel group. For those who don't know him, Roy is a recognition strategist, educator, and speaker. He has been in the employee recognition field for 24 years now, and he is also the author of Practicing Recognition, How to Give Meaningful Recognition to People Every Day. Thank you for joining us, Roy.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
Yes, so we have a very interesting subject today, especially during this time of the year. 2020 has been a very tough year for everyone. Do you believe we can make recognition better in 2021?
I certainly do. I'm very confident that recognition can be improved any time of the year and is not restricted by the circumstances that we've gone through, for example, with the pandemic. Recognition isn't dependent on those kinds of situations. It's not something that's hindered by a lot of things because it's a personal one-on-one interaction that we have with people, and that's something that can happen all the time. And even if we're using technology, that's also available to us online wherever we're working. So I'm quite confident that recognition, being a learned behavior, is something that can be adjusted, modified, improved, learned, all the things that we need to do to make recognition better. I think we can do it. I'm really confident that there's an exciting year ahead. It may be done differently. I'm not pretending that, Tamika. But yes, I think we can make recognition a lot better in 2021.
I think it's going to be a good opportunity to think about 2020 and how we can do things better and different in 2021. For managers, where should they start with planning for better recognition next year?
Sure. I'm a big fan of Stephen R. Covey's books, 7 Habits of Highly Successful People and other books. And then he talks about, that you need to begin with the end in mind. And so if you're looking at 2021 and how you're going to improve recognition, I think it's good to kind of look at collectively with other people, if possible, talk about what do you want recognition to look like by the end of 2021? I mean, let's just go right to the end, right there, December 2021. What's recognition going to look like for us in our organization? And then it's about creating that vision and purpose of what you want recognition to look like. And it may require doing a gap analysis, for example, of the things that are going on presently or not going on, as the case may be, and looking at the quality of that recognition. whether it be online, in person, or obviously, if from a remote point of view, how are we doing in connecting with people and making sure that we're recognizing our remote employees, for example. So you have to evaluate how you're doing. How do you stack up? Often it's good to use different standards like Recognition Professionals International 7 best practice standards. And how are we doing with communicating recognition? How are we doing with having a recognition strategy, etc.? So how well are our practices, our recognition practices doing? How well do managers practice recognition? And how well are they using the programs? And the same with our employees. And what are the recognition practices that we may need to encourage others to do, or set an expectation of this is what we want to have happen next year? What are those behaviors? What are those uses of the program? How can we do things differently and better? So do a gap analysis, find out the strengths and weaknesses of the organization, of your managers, of your employees, and start to look for things that you can work on as a focus point, for example.
Definitely. And sometimes we even forget about um, getting employees feedback. And I think it's the most important thing because we make this whole recognition program for them. So yeah, it's something that we should think about too, but you have some interesting points. And how would you say people can set the right kind of goals for improving recognition?
Yeah, I think as I've shared just a minute ago, that we have to kind of set the overall visionary 1 year objective of what we want to achieve. What's the major focus for the organization for recognition? For some people, it may be, if we're still going to be at home for a while, for example, for a lot of us in working, how are we going to better connect and reach out to our remote employees and recognize them? Uh, Once you've got that kind of overall goal, from your gap analysis, you're going to have a sense of where your strengths and weaknesses are with employee recognition. And where do we want to focus? Is it going to be, and I can tell you just from common observation of many organizations I've looked at, that often education and training is a big need, for example, because people don't know how to give recognition effectively. It might be that we need to set up communication and even create a communication calendar for recognition. Too often we don't put recognition into that corporate communication planning, for example. And then, it's once you've got those focus areas, and you might have 2, 3, I'd say no more than 5 areas that you want to focus on. Now you set some actionable goals that you want to achieve during the next year. And I think many of us have heard of the SMART goal acronym. You need to be, specific. It's got to be measurable. It's got to be, achievable. It's got to be relevant to the needs of recognition, and obviously time-based. There's got to be some time element of when you're going to achieve those goals. So find the gaps, look at what your focus point is, make sure you've got that overriding kind of North Star kind of goal that you want to achieve. Have the focus areas, put some actionable goals underneath those focus areas, and make sure that you've got some very actionable statements in those goals that can be achieved. So that's certainly strong recommendation for how you can kind of plan out how you're going to improve recognition.
Yes. You've also shared in your articles that people should have good metrics or outcomes for their goals.
Mhm.
Why is that?
I think it's essential for helping anyone who's working on this. And I'm going to take the idea that larger organizations will have the opportunity to get other employees involved in working on these goals. So I mentioned earlier about communications, for example. So you might have a representative from your corporate communications on a team And hopefully you'll have some, employees who can volunteer time during their workday, having that permission to do that. And they need to know the objective, yes, that they're working on. So they're working on communication. What is it we're going to work on? And how do we measure that? So you need measurements, those outcome measures of what we're going to achieve, and whatever indicators you can to know your own success in achieving those goals, and to report upwards, to the recognition program leader, as to how well you are progressing in your goal. This is really, really important, because if you don't know how far you are in achieving a goal, you don't know if you have to readjust the goal. You don't know if you're being successful. You need to report up on where things are at, so it's a gauge of your progress. So these are important, and concrete metrics help any team implement the goal that you want to achieve. And I think it just helps people feel good that they're making a difference, that they are progressing with the goal. So measures, metrics, whatever indicators or outcomes you can have for each of those focus areas and their goals is going to be a great indicator for success and achieving the overall objective at the end of the year.
Yes, definitely. Before we continue with the webinar, I just want to remind everyone who's watching to not hesitate to ask questions in the Q&A function. You can participate in the conversation, and I will ask them live, so Roy will be able to answer them. So Roy, tell us, how can people keep the momentum going to achieve their recognition goals?
Yeah, I think goals, we need to be held accountable for achieving goals. So hopefully, as a recognition leader, manager, owner of recognition in your organization, you would have some director or executive sponsor for recognition that you can report up to. So number one, that kind of accountability is critical, I think, to know that this isn't all in vain, and that you have someone you can report to and hopefully even bounce off ideas, let alone the progress that your teams are making. I also advocate creating a 90-day action plan. When I used to work in healthcare, we had consultants come in and they would do a kind of a gap analysis of where our strengths and weaknesses were, things we needed to improve. And we'd all create these flip charts all over the walls of things that needed to improve and the goals we were going to achieve. And boy, it looked good. And then at the beginning of the new year, I remember going into my CEO and saying, nothing's happening. Nothing's happening. We set all these goals, and nothing's changed. And he said, what do you think is the solution? And I knew that my CEO was a very decisive man. And I thought, can I come back? Because I wasn't prepared for that. And I should have been, but I wasn't. So I was new to the organization. And so I went away and I came back and I said, I got the word. He said, okay, what is it? And I said, implementation. And he just kind of nodded his head. And I realized that for me, it was important that any kind of goals, strategic planning that we create around recognition, implementation has to be a focus point. And so a 90-day action plan causes you to break down that 1 year set of goals that you have. For each focus area, you're creating a 90-day action plan. And so you would have, 4 90-day action plans in a year. Breaking it down makes it look a little bit more manageable. And so you set out this 90-day action plan of what you're going to do with, perhaps if you're maybe you're the education training team and you're looking to create a 1 hour, 1.5 hour education program throughout the organization that's going to go to teach everybody how to give more effective recognition, or how to use your online recognition programs better, for example. And we all have other jobs to do. We all have other work and tasks to do. So breaking this down into 90 days, now what I suggest is that people create 2-week sprints where we're now breaking it down. And for each month, we've got a 2-week sprint where, okay, we're going to investigate the technology that we're going to use for this learning, because we're going to do an online training program because we can't do on-site ones anymore. So let's investigate the various tools that we have, the platforms that we have. Okay, who's got the expertise on how to be able to design? Is it just going to be a straightforward PowerPoint? Is it going to be a voice over PowerPoint that people can get on demand? We're going to make some decisions, but that's the first 2 weeks. And the second 2 weeks, okay, what's the content outline going to be? And you just mind map for over those 2 weeks. The goal is to come away with a mind map of the various things that need to be covered and prioritized in that learning program. Now, each person on that team is looking at this is the sprint for 2 weeks. These are the things I need to work on. Now we're going to block some time in our calendar, and we're going to schedule when we're going to work on things, either individually or collectively. All of a sudden, this isn't such a hard task anymore. And this becomes, I think, very meaningful, very reinforcing. And then what we do is you just make sure that everyone's acting on those goals. So I think breaking it down, I got this big goal, break it down. It's called the Swiss cheese effect, where you've got to put little holes in the cheese. And by putting little holes in these goals, these big goals, in small ways, things get done, tasks get done, goals get achieved, and it becomes quite exciting to work together on a team to implement the goals rather than just having written goals on a piece of paper.
Definitely, to bring the subject to life rather than just. So we have a question. The question is, do you have any fun tips to suggest that would help reignite recognition in the new year?
Okay. So we've got a new year coming up, and what are some things we can do? I think one way we can kind of get excited about the new year and kind of really invigorate recognition is to maybe create some volunteer teams in different departments, individuals or teams, and make them ambassadors for recognition. They will be the go-to person to get ideas from, because they would work with the person who's the recognition manager. They would get ideas. They would perhaps provide the resources, whether that's paper-based things or teach people how to use the online recognition programs. Another thing might be for each department to have a rotating award for achieving just someone contributing well within the department, for example, and they get the award of the month. And I'm not necessarily one for talking about employee of the month as a great idea, but I think in these times in which we're in, we need to get some connectivity with people. And so if you've done a great job, Tamika, why don't I send you an award that has it can be just a fun award. It can be a crazy award. I mean, years ago, Hewlett Packard, there was a manager who did something quite unusual for an award. An employee came in, and the manager just wanted to commend them for an outstanding job with the project and achieving it in such record time. And he didn't know what to give the employee, and he literally had his banana on his desk from his lunch, and he gave the employee, "This is the banana award for achieving this project completion." And while it was all done in a fun and good spirit, the irony is they created a banana award, and it went around like a real tangible, maybe a plastic banana. I don't know what it was, but and they spray painted it gold, and it became the thing that went around. And I think we need to put some of that kind of fun in. So I think it's things like this. We need to personally, I think personally, we can also look at what am I going to do this week better than last week with recognition? What's one thing I'm going to do differently in the month? So I have my weekly goal, but here's the one thing in a month. This is something, I'm not going to do every week. This is my monthly goal for recognition. And then perhaps over a quarter, what's one thing during that quarter that I could be contributing to with making recognition better?
The banana award is a very creative idea.
Yeah,
Love
why
it.
not?
Yes. So, Roy, what can recognition managers do to hold themselves accountable for their recognition plans?
Yeah, I think it's important that as we've set these, annual goals and these 90-day goals, that we don't just let it sit there. As the owner of recognition in your organization, and hopefully, and I'm going to go from the framework again, that you have a large organization and you have teams working away on each of these focus points. What I would do is I would expect the team leader of those goals to send a 30-day, every 30 days, send an email update to you as the recognition program owner as to the progress they're making. And you and I know that there are some months that are terrible for getting other things done. The demands are high. Some are great. You've got these little windows of opportunity where you can work away on this goal. If you didn't have a good opportunity, then you would just say, this was a lousy month, work demands were high, we're going to work on the same task next 30 days. We're going to do these 2-week sprints and we're going to work on these things. We didn't do well, but we're committed to doing better. Or it could be now we've progressed and we're going to the next 2-week sprints, 2 in a month. That's wonderful. So then every 90 days, I would encourage the team leaders to now send a 1-page report of everything they've done over those 90 days. And you now have that accumulated evidence of the progress that's been made. And notice, here we were at 0, and now we've got 90 days in, and we know we're moving. We're moving towards the end of the year goal, for example. So I think that kind of process allows you as the program owner to know what each of the teams are doing. And then you, as the overall manager, can now use those 90-day reports with their 1-page outcomes and progress made and things like this. That can be used by you to work with your director or senior leader to give them the progress on where things are at. I think we need to do more of this to be held accountable for the goals and plans that we're making. And I think this is a method that allows each of those team leaders to work with their teams and just share the excitement and the success of what is happening and the fact that we've got movement, there's progress happening. And then you can report up to your senior leader, whoever that is.
Yes, and I think the 90-day progress report is a great idea, and I think you have something for us that we can share with our attendees.
Absolutely, Tamika. What we've done, I put together this 90-day recognition action plan, and it allows you to be able to write in the 1-year short-term objective that you have, which might be, how to give recognition the right way and establish a culture, values to drive recognition, for example. You would write in the focus point. You could write down you could print this off, use it for each focus area that you have, and you would write that down. And then what's your 90-day objective to progress your goal in that area? It allows you to kind of fill in the 2-week action sprints that you have and the specific actions that you're going to take. So I believe we're going to send this out to everybody, if I'm not mistaken, Tamika, a few days after we've done today's webinar. Is that right?
Yes. So for whoever wants this tool, we're going to send it to everyone. It's going to be in a PDF format, so you can print it out if you want it. So we will share this with you.
Yeah, and I think for larger organizations, as I shared before, it's easier because you're going to have each focus area owned by a team and they report up to whoever owns the program. If you're a smaller organization, the inevitability is that you won't have access to those kinds of teams. And so what I recommend, Tamika, is that those individuals literally look at their focus areas that they've got and then just prioritize them and take on one at a time. So the first 90 days might be one focus area, second 90 days might be another focus area. Or you may have to take them over 180 days, one focus area. Whatever's going to work best for you, but use it as a priority tool and use this as a technique to at least kind of organize yourself into those 90-day, 2-week sprints, and then get momentum going to succeed with your goals.
Yes, and thank you, Roy, for sharing this with us. I don't know if we have any last questions, but if you have questions, oh, we have one. Okay. So, what is your number one recognition best practice, Roy?
Oh, if I was to try and give a best practice, normally I would be thinking about the personal interactions that we have with people and how to give recognition the right way. Ironically, when you're looking at recognition programs, the data that we get from them tells us like how many e-cards were sent, how many recognition messages were posted on the social recognition news feed, for example. But it's always after the fact. We know the numbers after the fact, and that's why they're called lagging indicators. So lagging indicators are easy to measure because the data goes in, the data comes out. But you can't influence. I can't change what happened yesterday. I can't change what happened last month, last quarter, last year. What we need is a good leading indicator. And leading indicators are hard to measure, but they're much more easier to influence and affect. So I think, Tamika, the one thing I think I would tell our viewers today is that the best leading indicator for recognition is the number of interactions you have with your employees who report to you, or if it's on a peer-to-peer basis, how often do you, who do you work with? How many interactions do you have with your peers? Why do I put that as a best practice? It's because you have to kind of boil down what comes before any recognition occurs. Before any recognition occurs, you need to know what an employee is doing. I need to know, Tamika, what did you do today? How have you been successful? What's making you happy with your work? If I don't interact with you, I'm never going to know what those items are, those matters are, those moments are. So that's the biggest concern I have, especially with our work from home situation, is that because people are not as visible, not as connected, we don't know what people are doing anymore. And with that comes a reduction in the use of our recognition programs. If I know what people are doing, I can go on the programs, I can commend them, maybe with a phone, on the phone call, on the video call. Or if I hear about things, I can go onto our online programs and send messages out and maybe make the recognition more public by sharing it on our recognition platform, for example. That's the kind of best practice I think I would want people to focus on, is how many interactions are you having with your employees?
So we have a second part to this question.
Mm.
It's if we don't have a formal recognition program in place, are there any basic tips that you can share with us to help make it a priority within our company?
Yeah, I think first off, you have to ask the obvious questions. Why do you need a recognition program? Is it to make things easier for us to recognize people who are not visible, we don't see all the time? So many managers have employees who don't meet with them on a regular basis, but they still report to that manager. So if we need to create an easier method for recognizing more than one people, especially a team of people, for example, when we don't meet face to face, that might be a reason why. The ability to just keep track of the recognition moments that we have with people is another benefit of online recognition programs. And if there is a demand, for example, from our leaders to see how recognition can be leveraged to improve certain metrics, key performance indicators, retention, performance levels, the only way we can really show the benefit of recognition is to have a program where we have data that we can see how well managers, peers are recognizing one another and seeing the correlation with the performance metrics that we're concerned about, for example. So I think it's important to kind of have that conversation of how would an online recognition program help us? How would we benefit from it? What gains would we get? I think having that kind of conversation and talking about what the needs are would help start the ball rolling for looking at bringing in perhaps an online recognition program.
Thank you, Roy, for answering all the questions, and thank you for everyone for participating. It was a very interesting webinar, especially to prepare for the next year. And this webinar is recorded, so for everyone who wants to watch it again, we'll send it to you via email. And Roy, we're gonna send out your handout, your 90-day program to everyone so they can use it within their company. So thank you for participating in this webinar, Roy,
Well, it's
and
good to be with
answering
you.
your questions. I will see everyone on our next webinar, hopefully, and have a very nice afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.